Finally, recall that these probabilities do not characterize whether a development effort will ever succeed. With more time and resources, odds increase. Rather, these probabilities characterize whether an effort will succeed in a given time frame. As such, a final lever to manipulate is expectations regarding timing. Opting for a less aggressive timeline may go against the grain, but it gives your slower co-innovators the chance to catch up. An important note, these numerical values illustrate the argument. In real life, of course, we don't have access to such precise probabilities. We can, however, use simple assessments of risk, a 1 to 5 scale or high, medium, low risk across the system, and apply the same logic. In settings where risk levels are more difficult or costly to specify, going through this exercise will help identify which risk components would be of greatest value to explore in depth. The key is not the numbers. These are here to clarify the intuition of what it means to manage in a world of dependence in joint probabilities. The key is to identify co-innovation risk and its potential effects. With a narrow focus on execution risk, these effects and these choices are hard to see and therefore hard to manage. When we use a wider lens to identify co-innovation risks more clearly, our approach to many strategic choices, scope, timing, partnering, leadership, changes dramatically. Nokia then and now. Nokia won the race for the 3G phone, but it was the wrong race. In late 2002, Nokia was first to market with the release of the 6650 in Europe, and in North America soon after. It was a hollow prize. The real race could not begin until the digital services were available. The 6650 was a Ferrari in a world without roads. In the absence of critical complements, the 3G offer was but a shadow of its promised self. A souped-up 2G service rather than the radical shift into a brave new world of mobile digital data service that impelled billions of dollars in investment. It wasn't until the late 2000s that the vision of mobile digital services for the mass market finally began to materialize, most notably with the emergence of Apple's iPhone in 2007. Through 2010, Nokia was the world's biggest producer of 3G phones. But as the smartphone shifted from the handset hardware to software apps running on the phone, Nokia seemed unprepared. The phones were fine as products but impoverished as solutions. The very essence of the game had changed under their feet. In his Burning Platform memo, outlining the dire straits facing Nokia, newly appointed CEO Steve Elop acknowledged that the battle of devices has now become a war of ecosystems, where ecosystems include not only the hardware and software of the device but developers, applications, e-commerce, advertising, search, social applications, location-based services, unified communications and many other things. It is a battle in which success means attracting and retaining, beyond customers, co-innovators. In February 2011, an acknowledgement of its changed circumstances, Nokia allied with Microsoft, signing on to the latter's Windows Phone operating system, pulling the plug on the Symbian platform it had nurtured since 1998. The future came, but it came late, and Nokia was not prepared for its implications. Asking not if, but when. Nokia's 3G misadventures with co-innovation risk are far from unique. Philips Electronics' misadventures with HDTV in the 1980s ended in failure not because the company couldn't deliver a great television with superior picture quality, it did so beautifully. The problem was the late arrival of high-definition television cameras and transmission standards, which left Philips with a $2.5 billion write-down that shook the financial stability of the company to its core. Philips was right about the vision but wrong about the timing. HDTV was the wave of the future, but the wave didn't arrive on the mass market shore until the late 2000s. Unfortunately, being half right provides little comfort in the midst of overall failure. This same story is being repeated today in the saga of three-dimensional television as leading firms like Sony, LG, and Toshiba have made huge investments in a race to the start line, where they wait restlessly for the arrival of 3D programming, which may or may not come, to unlock the market's potential. Too often, managers ask the wrong question when they begin their innovation journeys. In meetings and boardrooms, over lunches and drinks, the talk is focused on, can we do it, and how can it be done? Whether the vision is customized pharmaceuticals, solar energy generation, an innovative design for a drill bit, or a new line of organic-based shampoos, with enough talent, money, and time, most goals can be achieved. Like Nokia, ambitious companies will time and again set their sights on the next exciting innovation. And, like Nokia's, successful too often prove ephemeral. Why? The real question is not if it can be done, but when. Not just when will we be able to complete the project, but when will we be able to align the necessary ecosystem for the complete value proposition to become a reality. The question of if speaks to success in the abstract. The question of when speaks to returns, to attractiveness, to viability in the concrete. Being right about the vision offers cold comfort if we are wrong about the timing. Bad timing expectations are a core source of innovation failure. But as we will see in Chapter 6, understanding the nature of co-innovation can offer powerful clues for setting better timing expectations. The good news. Confronting the real odds of success can be jarring. But if we can see the risks clearly, removing them from our blind spot and placing them squarely in our focus, then we can manage them. Not knowing the real odds does not make the risk go away. It simply leads us to set unrealistic goals at the beginning and to suffer the cost of failure at the end. Co-innovation risk doesn't make things bad, just different. Once we understand co-innovation risk, the ways in which we prioritize opportunities and threats, the ways we think about market timing and positioning, and the ways we think about designing our offers and mitigating our risks all shift. Indeed, the very ways in which we measure and reward success all change. This is the good news. By seeing what is actually driving the odds of success, we improve our odds of success. Chapter 3, Adoption Chain Risk. Chapter 3, Adoption Chain Risk. Seeing all the customers before your end consumer. A range of intermediaries stand between you and your end customer: the distributor who needs to agree to bring your product to market, the retailer who needs to agree to showcase it, and the salesperson who needs to agree to sell it. Your success depends on each of these partners adopting your innovation and seeing the value it will create for them. If any one of these partners is not on board, you will never be able to reach your end customer. When does the best product lose? When the consumer doesn't have a chance to choose it. In this chapter we will examine adoption chain risk, the extent to which partners will need to adopt your innovation before end consumers have a chance to assess the full value proposition. Here our question shifts from whether partners can deliver the required co-innovations to whether they will see the value proposition as beneficial not only to the end consumer but to themselves as well. We all know that a natural tension exists between those selling a product and their target buyers. At its root is a misunderstanding over the notion of value, the balance between costs and benefits. Although both innovators and consumers use the terms cost and benefit to describe the way they think about value, they think about these terms in very different ways. Consider Microsoft's Office 2007 suite. When launched, the vast majority of enterprise users agreed that Office 2007 was superior to its predecessor, Office 2003. It had better code quality, was more reliable, and offered more features. According to Jeff Rakes, president of the Microsoft Business Division, the 2007 Microsoft Office System RTM, released to manufacturing, completes the most significant improvements to the products in more than a decade. And the price difference was zero. Enterprise customers pay Microsoft a fixed fee, per user, per month, to lease their Office software, independent of which version they use. Firms would need to pay just as much to use Office 2007 as Office 2003. A better product for the same price. This looks like an obvious win. But decision-makers at most companies, large and small, chose to stick with the clearly inferior Office 2003. Why? Total cost versus relative benefit. Innovators and customers view benefits and costs from very different perspectives. Missing the difference is a recipe for disaster. Innovators thinking about benefits in terms of what their product actually provides, the absolute benefit delivered to the customer. But customers thinking about benefits in terms of added value, the relative benefit delivered by the product compared to the available alternatives. Each group also has a different understanding of costs. While innovators tend to think of the price they will charge for their innovation as the determinant of customer cost, customers conceive of cost in terms of that price plus all the other changes they need to undertake in order to use the innovation, beyond the initial outlay, the cost of retraining, equipment upgrades, etc. While innovators tend to focus on delivering an offer whose absolute benefits exceed the purchase price, adoption happens only if the customer sees a clear surplus, that is, the relative benefits must exceed the total cost. These differences can lead to an assessment gap, and this gap can lead to disappointment. Office 2007 adoption lagged because, even if the price was free, the total cost was high, too high for most customers to justify. If you are a CIO considering an Office upgrade, your notion of cost goes well beyond price to include retraining, hardware upgrades, change over time, and all the unknowns that inevitably come with making a company-wide change. While the sales rep brags that Office 2007 is 99.9% compatible with 2003, what keeps the customer up at night is that last 0.1%. Not knowing whether the incompatibility affects the 9th iteration of Helvetica font or the critical invoicing macro changes the attractiveness of the offer dramatically. Perceived risk is an important contributor to non-price cost. And even though none of these costs show up in the innovator's revenues, they are all charged against the innovation's benefits. Frustratingly for Microsoft, Office 2007's total costs exceeded its relative benefits for most customers. Figure 3.1. Innovators and consumers have different views on what constitutes benefits and costs. In the end, the key driver of adoption for Office 2007 wasn't a change in its relative benefit, but rather a reduction in its total cost that accrued over time. As non-compatibility issues and bugs were gradually resolved, and as companies followed the natural replacement cycles for computer hardware, it became easier to justify the 2007 upgrade, until the next version of Office was launched in 2010, and the entire cycle started anew. Super abrasive grinding wheels. Take a look around your home. It's likely that you have abrasives to thank for the smooth shape of your sink's faucet, the sharp edge of your cutlery, and the tiny components that run your computer. Abrasives are the category of hard materials used to shape and polish softer objects in a variety of manufacturing processes. They constitute a mature industrial market with revenues of close to $4 billion in 2010. Figure 3.2, a grinding wheel in use. Photo compliments of Saint-Gobain abrasives. Superabrasive grinding wheels were an innovation born when GE introduced synthetic diamonds in 1955. At the time, industry leaders agreed that superabrasives were going to transform the industry. They were much harder than their conventional brethren, aluminum oxide, silicon carbide, and therefore offered many benefits. They were more durable, required less frequent dressing. The process by which the outer layer of the wheel maintains its coarseness and its trueness could be used at higher speeds, allowed higher production rates, and could enable better products with finer finishes and tighter tolerances. Superabrasives were more expensive, with prices up to 30 times more than those of conventional wheels, but they lasted up to 100 times longer. With their longer lives, their higher production rates, and their decreased need for human intervention, superabrasives would offer greater overall efficiency and increased performance. Expectations were high. Despite their grand promise, however, today superabrasives make up only approximately 15% of the abrasives market. This innovation has had nearly 50 years to make good on initial excitement and capture market share, yet it has reached a plateau. What went wrong? The relative benefit of superabrasive grinding wheels was real and high, but the total costs were high as well. They were not just more expensive to buy, they imposed new costs in their use. To take advantage of higher grinding speeds, manufacturers would need to invest in higher speed grinders, the powered machine tools used for grinding. The greater hardness of the wheel meant that the machines used to dress them needed to change too. And because higher speeds required greater precision in the way in which the wheels were dressed and balanced, it meant staff needed to be retrained and upskilled. The balance of total cost, relative benefit depended on the application. Where tight tolerance requirements combine with long production runs, such as selected manufacturing steps within the aerospace and automotive sectors, total surplus was positive, and superabrasive grinding wheels made deep market inroads. But outside these niches, taking into consideration the total cost of the value proposition, most of the market opted to stay with traditional grinding wheels. At 15% market share, were superabrasive grinding wheels a successful innovation? It depends on your viewpoint. Success is always assessed relative to expectations. For early enthusiasts, superabrasive's niche market as a disappointment. After all, what promised to be a revolution ended up being a small but healthy advancement in the industry. However, a number of firms developed a balanced view of the relative benefits and total cost of superabrasive wheels. They designed their organizations, and allocated their resources, with the niche market as an explicit target. For them, 15% market penetration is a high-margin cause for celebration. From adoption to adoption chains. Once products are established, these handoffs are seamless. Indeed, achieving this seamlessness is a primary element of what it means to be established. But new offers can disturb the existing routines. When adoption chains are fragile, outcomes are uncertain. In today's interdependent world, the successful innovator must treat each partner as a customer even if they are not in a direct business relationship. Whereas the logic of co-innovation is one of multiplication, not averages, adoption chains follow a logic of minimums, not net surplus. Consider the two innovation proposals, A and B, illustrated in Figure 3.3. Both require that your innovation pass through two intermediaries before reaching the end customer. the distributor who sells the product to a retailer, who then sells the product to the end customer. Innovation creates high value for the innovator, it is highly profitable, with surplus of +4, high value for the distributor, high margins and low handling costs. With surplus of +3, slightly negative value for the retailer, higher upfront costs, retraining and after-sales service headaches, despite slightly higher margins, with a deficit of -1. And very high value for the end customer, surplus of +5. Innovation B creates positive, but low, surplus for everyone in the chain, surplus of +1 for each of the 4 actors. The net system surplus created by Innovation A has 11, 4 + 3 2 1 + 5. The net system surplus created by Innovation B is 4, 1 + 1 + 1 + 1. Which one should you bet on? We have all been trained to focus on the customer, to listen to the voice of the customer, to try our utmost to delight the customer. But as the adoption chain makes explicit, we rarely have just one customer. Which customer in the chain is most important? All of them. Each and every intermediary that is part of the ecosystem needs to see surplus from adopting the innovation. A single instance of rejection is enough to break the entire chain. The logic of adoption chains dictates that Innovation A, despite the far higher value it creates for the end customer, +5 versus +1, and the higher net surplus that it creates for the chain as a whole, +1 versus +4, will fail. It will fail, not because the end customer won't prefer it, but because the end customer will never have the chance to choose it. As long as the retailer is worse off with innovation than with its current alternative, it will be a broken link in the adoption chain. Ironically, despite its lower value creation, Innovation B will sail through the adoption chain. A moderate but attainable win is infinitely more valuable than a huge but hypothetical victory. Figure 3.3, surplus along the adoption chain for 2 innovations. Expect failure if any link is negative. As was the case with co-innovation risk, however, the very act of recognizing the sources of adoption chain risk can suggest avenues for addressing it. Rather than abandon the effort, the wise innovator will revisit the plan for Innovation A with an eye to eliminating the retailer's deficit by finding an alternative partner, an alternative path, or by reallocating surplus along the chain to put the retailer in positive surplus, for example, shifting the end consumer's surplus from +5 to +3 to move the retailer from -1 to +1. These mitigation steps are themselves innovations to the structure of ecosystems. Risk can be managed proactively, but only if it is recognized in advance. As clear as this may seem in theory, in practice it's easy for innovators to overlook the incentives and motivations of the intermediaries to which they have no direct links. For this reason, it can be tempting to turn your gaze inward to issues you can better control. But ignoring your dependency on others will not prevent them from upending your innovation efforts. The key is to ask the difficult questions from day one, unearthing what everyone in the adoption chain needs in order to push your innovation down the line. What are these difficult questions? They are the questions that probe for constraints and problems rather than for support and uncommitted agreement. Recall Michelin's run-flat disaster from Chapter 1. What if the company had asked the garage is not? Will you be willing to incorporate new machinery and retrain your staff to fix packed tires, but rather, will you be willing to incorporate new machinery and retrain your staff to fix packed tires even before there are a substantial number of packed tires on the road? The answer would have been unpalatable, but it would have been critically useful. Michelin's leadership would have had the opportunity to modify their strategy to figure out how to manage the garage adoption problem in advance of the PAX launch, instead of scrambling and improvising when it was already too late. If the innovators at Michelin had truly understood the nature of their adoption chain challenges, then they might have approached the market in a very different way. For example, one option, among others, could have been a multi-year exclusivity to a single car maker. This would increase the car maker's differentiation advantage compared with their rivals in exchange for a strong guarantee that their dealerships would all install repair equipment in their service garages within the first year of launch. With the equipment installed, these dealerships could service PAX tires on any make of car, such that when exclusivity ended, a service infrastructure would be in place. In Chapter 8 we will explore such strategies under the heading of establishing a minimum viable footprint. For innovators who believe they have a great product, as Michelin did with PAX, proactively limiting the size of early success can be a challenging strategy to embrace. But the disaster of launching without having addressed adoption chain problems is far worse. The only way such an option can be debated seriously is if you begin your discussion with a wide-lens view of your ecosystem. Adoption chain risk is a product of the tug-of-war between innovation and the status quo. The challenge is convincing critical partners that there is positive value for themselves in joining your efforts when they feel they are doing just fine as is. Sometimes this is a matter of communication. But as we will see in the following example, often it requires innovating the innovation ecosystem itself. How digital cinema turned a minus into a plus. In the late 1990s, Hollywood's Dream Factory had a dream. Since its earliest days, stars, from Charlie Chaplin to Cary Grant to Marilyn Monroe to Julia Roberts to Russell Crowe, were all projected into our imaginations through the same technology, celluloid film. Digital technology was enabling new magic in almost every stage of movie making, special effects, editing, sound, but movie projection remained the province of the industry's standard for over half a century. While the click-clack sound of spinning reels may evoke nostalgic smiles among audiences, for the studios the need to print, ship, and retrieve bulky canisters of analog film was both costly and inefficient. And in the midst of a fertile technology boom, a new way to distribute, project, and enjoy movies finally emerged in the form of digital cinema. As analog formats throughout the media world were falling away, the transition to digital cinema seemed a certainty. Building on the foundations already laid by the development of the Laserdisc and more successfully, the DVD, the technology path to digital was clear. The value proposition was unambiguous: higher resolution picture quality, better protection from piracy, flexibility of programming, the potential for 3D screening, and, for the studios, the elimination of costly film prints. Bringing this exciting new technology to the masses required technological advances. Most crucial was the development of the digital projectors themselves. Happily for the studios, the first commercial DLP, digital light processing, projectors became commercially available as early as 1996. However, as we saw in the case of 3G in Chapter 2, the mere availability of an innovation is not enough for success. Often, a multitude of co-innovation challenges need to be overcome in order for the value proposition to become a reality. The co-innovations required for digital cinema's progress included analog to digital film conversion and data transfer, storage capabilities. These were ready too. The 1989 development of the digital telecine scanner, which rapidly converts film into a digital format, meant movies could be shot on film yet projected digitally. This was a great boon to the studios because it allowed them to avoid the challenge of convincing directors and production staff to adopt new equipment and techniques. Storage and delivery capabilities also fell in line. Hard drives at the time were capable of storing digital films if they were split over several drives, and content could be efficiently distributed over the internet through the newly developed high-speed T3 lines. By 1999, these key elements of the digital cinema projection system were ready, and moviegoers were treated to digital cinema for the first time when Star Wars Episode I: Phantom Menace was screened in Los Angeles and New York. In February 1999, the New York Times heralded, digital projectors could bring drastic changes to movie industry. But unfortunately for the studios, despite the viability and availability of this miraculous system, and its potential to save them millions in costs and add millions in revenues, digital cinema would spend the next 7 years in limbo. Yet, while digital projectors were used in less than 5% of U.S. cinema screens by the end of 2006, they were used in nearly 40% by the end of 2010. Why did it take nearly a decade for this appealing new technology to reach more than a handful of cinephiles? And what happened to finally speed its ascent? The answer lies in the adoption chain. Who stands to gain? In the digital cinema ecosystem, there were several key players who had to adopt the technology in order for it to reach the general moviegoer. The big movie studios certainly saw value in supporting and advancing digital cinema. After all, leaving celluloid behind also meant avoiding the $1 billion spent annually on the printing and shipping costs associated with traditional film. The cost of producing one film print falls between $2,000 and $3,000 per print. So, if a typical U.S. nationwide release is shown on about 3,000 screens, the studio's printing cost alone can come to $7.5 million. Digital cinema also opened up the possibility of releasing the film in what insiders call a day-and-date approach. Traditionally, movies were rolled out in a staggered fashion, which allowed the studios to control and minimize the costs of moving expensive, heavy prints around the globe. With digital cinema, films could be released everywhere simultaneously, offering an alternative to pirated films for over-eager global audiences. In addition, digital film technology allowed for encryption, which would further help reduce, though not eliminate, film piracy, to which studios attributed a cost of more than $3 billion per year. The distribution arm of the studios, as well as independent distributors, would also benefit from greater flexibility of tailoring the movie to a specific audience. Going digital meant that subtitles and multiple versions of trailers could be easily adjusted to better target a specific locale. Theater owners could operate more efficiently, with fewer staff required to operate and maintain the projection equipment. Of course, the suppliers of the projectors and equipment upgrades and service technicians for whom digital cinema provided a large new revenue stream saw the obvious value in the digital transition. And moviegoers would be winners too, enjoying an enhanced theater experience. Better resolution meant the images were brighter, crisper, and more engaging. What do you think people notice the first time they see film and digital cinema projected side by side? Asked Jim Quarries, the executive director of the Entertainment Technology Center at the University of Southern California. It's that people realize they've been looking at films that flicker their entire lives. Digital cinema is like looking out of a window. It's rock steady. Figure 3.4, the digital cinema ecosystem in 2003. So if everyone saw the benefit of adopting digital cinema, where was the problem? The answer lies with one player for whom the benefits were high, but not high enough to offset their total cost: the movie theaters. Imagine that it is 2003 and you are the owner of either an independent movie house or a chain of theaters and have been following the development of this new technology. Digital cinema is an exciting possibility. You could easily adjust which movies would be shown on which screen and thus take advantage of demand spikes for surprise hits. You've heard it would be possible to stream live sporting events and concerts, offering a new way to entice audiences, and there is even talk of mainstreaming 3D movies with higher ticket prices, but which could be screened only with digital projectors. The relative benefit is high, but so is the total cost. Cinemas are relatively low-margin businesses. Historically, they make most of their profits not from ticket sales but from concessions. For the vast majority, the $70,000 to $100,000 per screen conversion cost necessary to buy the digital projector and supporting hardware and software for an upgraded projection room was prohibitive. Moreover, digital projectors have a lifespan of only 10 years, compared to 30 to 40 years for traditional projectors. Add a lack of clarity about competing format standards that would take years to get settled, and it is easy to understand why a theater owner, considering the ongoing maintenance costs of this new, uncertain technology and weighing it against the familiar celluloid alternative, would hold off incorporating digital cinema. Maybe we'll do it next year, or the year after that.
जट्टा जट्टी फैन तेरी इसे गल तू यारां पिछे लहने नहीं स्टैंड छड्डदा हुंदी जिवें पुलिस पंजाब भरती तू लोड़ पई ते यारां पिछे भजदा बेशक लड़ने तो राह रोकदी पर जे कोई करू तेरे उत्ते वार वे रख दूं विचारो ओदी हिक पार के इन्नी गोदा सीने विच रखा खार वे जस्सी लोका राह जपदी तेरी दीद नूं है दिल 24/7 तरसे